Okay, well, maybe we can get going for today's meeting, and I know folks will be joining us in process, and that's great. By way of introduction, I'm Wib Gully. I work with the coalition and its coordinating committee, and we are really happy to have all of you join us. I wish everyone Happy New Year at the start of what we hope will be a much better 2021, and a better one for health, for the local economy, and for the very challenging endeavors that have only been made more challenging around affordable housing, affordable transit. And in that sense, we're really happy to have all of you all join with us in that effort and in that work. I know now that we have 64 folks with us, and I won't be able to recognize everybody, but it is great to have the chair of the Durham County Commissioners, Brenda Howerton, with us. Commissioner Howerton, Chair Howerton, it's good to have you. And I know you can only stay for a while, but it's good to have you,
Thank
period.
you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good to be here.
Good. And we have several city, county, and county staff folks with us that are involved in these areas, and it's really great to have you all and your participation as well. I'm particularly happy to see Stella Adams, who's my program chair for this. So with no further ado, I trust you all. Most of you have had a chance to see the agenda, and I'm just going to follow it. So first off, we want to have a spotlight presentation, which we've been trying to use to give one of the organizations or groups or people involved with key aspects of the affordable housing and transit work in our community a chance to sort of introduce themselves for a couple of minutes. And today we have Volunteers of America, and Dick Hales, I was going to see if you wanted to introduce our speaker.
Very briefly, thanks, Wib. We're happy to have with us today Ms. Ashley Riggelman, Assistant Director for Volunteers of America, which has both local serving and regional facilities here in Durham. Very important work on delivering housing services and others to veterans of our armed forces. And she's here today to give us a brief look at some of the important work they are doing. Ashley.
Thank you. Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here. As he said, my name is Ashley Riggelman. I am Assistant Director of the SSVF program with Volunteers of America. As far as Volunteers of America go, it is a nonprofit organization that was established in 1896. So we've been around for a long time. It is a nonprofit, and we consider ourselves a church without walls. So it is a faith-based nonprofit. As far as North Carolina goes, we mostly offer services focused on veterans. The program that I work with is called SSVF, which stands for Supportive Services for Veterans and Their Families. We also have an HVRP program, which focuses on helping veterans get employment. We have a GPD program, which helps with case management and supporting housing retention with veterans. And then we have Maple Court, which is actually a transitional housing program that we have in Durham for veterans. So like I said, so VOA does have offices all over the country. In North Carolina, our SSVF program, we cover 61 counties in the state. We do have a large presence in Durham and Wake County, but we also have offices in Salisbury, Fayetteville, and Rocky Mount. So we do cover 61 counties to try to prevent homelessness and also focus on rapid rehousing of homeless veterans in those counties. We are funded by the VA. So we do have a substantial grant through them to provide financial assistance to those veterans. And like I said, we also do provide case management and other supportive wraparound services for those veterans. We even have new positions for health navigators to help connect veterans to VA healthcare services and other mainstream healthcare services. We have benefit specialists as well who also help connect veterans with any kind of benefits that they may be entitled to, whether it be Social Security, disability, food pantries, things like that. Because we are funded by the VA, we do have guidelines that a veteran must meet before they qualify for the SSVF program. The main two are that they have to have been a veteran, of course, that was discharged in any other form except dishonorably. And the second part is that they must meet our income requirements, and those vary by county. So a little bit about our process, and I'll put this in the chat when I'm finished, so everybody has it. And I will also forward it to Mr. Hales. We have a referral form that someone from the organization that has come in contact with a veteran or the veteran's family that may qualify for our program and needs assistance with either preventing them from being homeless, or if they actually are homeless, they can send a referral in to an email that I'll put in the chat box, and I'll send the actual referral form to Mr. Hales so he can distribute that accordingly. So once someone from the organization sends in a referral to our office, we go through a screening process to see if the veteran does meet the requirements. It's usually a quick phone screen. And if they do meet those initial requirements, then they meet with a case manager in our office to get documents and to get them officially enrolled in the program. I know that was a lot of information, but I think I've about covered it all. Did anybody have any questions?
Maybe what we could do is ask folks to post questions in the chat, if that's okay, and also
absolutely. And let me pull up the chat.
Information that you suggested, and we're grateful, Ashley, for you being with us and filling us in about that, and for the work you all are doing. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, thank you. I'll check the chat to see if there were anything.
Okay, and yes, applause. I am happy that we're up to almost 80 folks now with us today, and it's good to have everyone. Particularly happy that City Council Member Charlie Reese is able to join us, and State Representative Marsha Morey are able to join us along with everybody else on this call. And I want to now recognize for just a couple of minutes for an important update, a leader from the Merrick neighborhood, Ms. Bonita Green. And we understand that there's a timely matter, Ms. Green, in terms of what's going on for the neighborhood and your efforts to deal with development around you. And so we wanted to hear from you and make everybody aware on the call, both of what's going on and ways they might be able to help. So it's good to have you with us, and I'll turn things over to you now.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Gully. Hello, everyone, and I appreciate this time. Where Merrick stands in the redevelopment, there is a rezoning issue that's within our community, as well as it will affect neighborhoods of Milan Woods, Northeast Hills, and Landon Woods. We are scheduled to appear before the City Council on February 1st. And so at this point, we would be needing as much support as possible across the city for our case. We have large concerns around safety, and that are the safety issues on Cheek Road. There's a lot of building and development going on in this corridor, but the rural roads in these corridors, there's no plan for updating the infrastructure. So these roads are very unsafe. There are no sidewalks, and there's heavy traffic, and already the traffic is very aggressive. There was a really bad traffic accident just a few weeks ago at Cheek and Hoover. As well as this housing development that's going in, there's no plan to address affordable housing within that plan for that development. I did speak to the middleman, Mr. Tim Sivers, directly, and that issue was just kind of brushed off. So they're not addressing that. We also have issues around home insecurity, housing insecurity, because our property taxes have been steadily increasing over the past 5 years or so, but there has been no investment in our community. We're also dealing with the issue of a city park that's taking over a large part of our community, and we were not included at all in the process. We found out about it, when the ribbon cutting ceremony was. I had been in touch with the junior director of Durham Parks and Recreation, and we were told that the community would be included in the planning process. And that was in 2018, 2019 or so. But like I said, we only found out about it. So we've got several issues that we're dealing with over here that are going to bring more traffic onto Cheek Road. We've had deaths in our community from pedestrians walking on this road. So there's several issues that need to be addressed. And we really need the support of everyone within Durham community on these issues.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, thank you. And that's a good report back to us and update with regard to those different issues. I know that you have several key staff folks from the city and the county too, probably, but particularly the city that hopefully will be able to work with you all on those things. And I guess you would ask that any of us that might have communications with members of the city and to the extent the county's involved, to encourage them to work well with your neighborhood starting now would be a good way for us to help. Is that right, Ms. Green?
Yes, of course. And I'm also going to be putting together an email campaign, so I'll forward that information to you as well.
Okay, and we'll get it out to everybody.
Yeah, this Thursday is the work session for our case. So Thursday evening, if anyone is interested in attending the work session, please join. Thank you.
That's helpful, and you can do that online. And the neighborhood, I see somebody asking, the neighborhood is called the Merrick-Moore, MERRICK-MOORE, Merrick Moore neighborhood, although there's several adjacent neighborhoods that Ms. Green mentioned that are also part of this, I think. Okay, well, thank you for that. And I want to belatedly, but hope not too belatedly, say also that we're so happy to have Commissioner Wendy Jacobs and our new Commissioner, Nimashina Burns, join us. It's good to have both of you all on the call with us today. Thank you for making time for this, along with everybody else. So with that, and staying right on time, I'm really happy to welcome and say how much I appreciate Stella Adams. Stella, as probably most of you know, is the chair of the Housing Committee of the Durham Committee on the Affairs of Black People. And Stella has been working since she's from Durham and worked here a lot. I know back from when I was with city government, but she's fortunately come back to us and is helping now in general, but also particularly on housing matters. And it's so good to have her involvement. And Stella has done a great deal of work to pull together our speakers and our program for today. And we're very grateful, Stella, for that help. So with no further ado, I will turn things over to you.
Thank you so much, Wib. So I think, as you can see, I'm in a mask today. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to operate with my cute picture instead of the mask. In order not to be deflective and to be, so that's how I'm going to operate.
That's fine, of course.
That way you can hear me because I can take the mask hopefully off a little bit. So my dearest friend Wib Gully, back in late November, early December, said, Stella, I want you to run this program about barriers that minority and women-owned businesses face in Durham, and for this date. And I said, no problem. And so I went to just get a sampling of what was going on, and I opened Pandora's box. I don't know if I have the ability to share screen, but I found 2 bids from the same department, the Department of Parks and Recreation. One was a 130-page RFP to paint a gym. The other, released about a week later, was a 30-page RFP to build a ropes course. The likelihood that a small contractor was going to attempt to get a 130-page RFP to paint a wall and 4 beams seemed somewhat ridiculous. I then called upon my dearest friends, La-Tasha Best, Kevin Price, and Henry McCoy, to talk about the systemic barriers that they run across as they seek to help minority vendors and women-owned vendors at each turn. I'm not going to take up time because we don't have a lot of it, but I'm going to start with La-Tasha, and then I'm going to follow up with Henry, and I'm going to ask Kevin, who is the new executive director of the Institute, to close us out. La-Tasha is used to run the Small Business Technical Center, and she's now running her own business called Infinity Bridges. Is that right, La-Tasha?
That is correct, Stella. Thank you.
and I'm going to ask her to kind of open up with some remarks about the difficulties that in contracting with our government. This should be our entryway for small minority and women-owned businesses. This should be our entree into the world. This is how we should be getting our roots made. That's the commitment both the city and the county have made. And I'm going to ask La-Tasha to talk about what obstacles folks face and how we can overcome them.
All right. Thank you, Stella. And thank you for kind of setting the tone. So, and thank you everyone for being on today. So I'll just kind of jump right to it because as Stella mentioned, we don't have a lot of time. So the first thing that she kind of mentioned in terms of the documentation or what's required is there's a huge technology barrier. So when and technology on many different fronts as it refers to when a request for proposal is submitted and when an entrepreneur has the time to review it and then respond. So there is a barrier in just that whole process, but then also the technology. So what has happened is, of course, now we're, as a result of COVID or coronavirus, we're now looking at doing everything remotely. However, there are some things within our government systems and the RFP process even has not also changed or kept up with being able to do things remotely and submit things electronically. And then our entrepreneurs don't have all the documents or things where they can, supporting documents where they can submit electronically. So that is one, major barrier and a major, point of communication in getting more access to RFP processes and minority and small and women-owned businesses to participate. And I guess I will also add veteran-owned businesses because of the earlier person. So when we're looking at it, we're looking at that. And then the second barrier, which is increasing, is then just access to capital to perform. So of course, still that is a major issue. It continues to grow and that gap continues to grow. And then the third and last challenge, I would just say, and then turn it over to Henry to add to that, is really for entrepreneurs to be able to really compete in the marketplace when we're looking at and having their internal capacity. So having their operations where they can be competitive. So they can definitely do the work, but then some of the back end office work, they don't have that capacity together. So they have the capacity to perform, but then maybe some of the back end operations, which also includes, making sure they're getting the invoices and the invoices are paying in a timely manner. So those are going to be what I consider as the top three. And then Henry, I'm going to hand the baton to you to kind of add to those either top three, or maybe if you wanted to expound on those even more. But those are where we're seeing entrepreneurs are still having some difficulty today.
Well, thank you so much, Tasha, for kind of that lead, and thank you, Stella, for the invitation. Great to see everybody. 85 folks. I'm like, this must be the place to be. So happy to connect with you all on the day. And so, as Tasha mentioned and Stella mentioned, I mean, this is a conversation that obviously we could have, and it could go much longer. And many of you have heard me, kind of on my soapbox, on a regular basis about the challenges that minority, particularly African American entrepreneurs face. And so I will actually kind of pick up on where Tasha kind of left off. And so Tasha talked about kind of what I would call kind of at the entrepreneurial level, the micro level. I want to give my 3 points at kind of the macro level, and I'm sure Kevin will come back and kind of wrap it all up nicely, dealing with capital and things of that nature. I generally talk about access to capital and access to particularly equity capital that helps businesses grow, which is a key factor. But I actually want to talk about 3 other things very quickly that I think are very important to understand about the biggest challenges that particularly Black entrepreneurs have, and then on the broader level that the community ends up. Regardless of what's been happening over the last several decades, even as the economy has expanded and contracted, Black wealth has been declining. And this was, was declining at a rapid pace, but before COVID-19 it declined even more. So the first point I want to make is that even as we are sitting in this moment right now where, so many folks are talking about, diversity, equity, so many folks are talking about, how do we make investments? And you see all these, every day somebody's corporations trying to make an investment. The reality is that a lot of white firms are moment. And what I mean by that is that, if you see, there was a great article in the Washington Post yesterday called "The Whitewashing of Black Wall Street," and it really talked about kind of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Tulsa, Oklahoma is kind of, as you know, is the other community that has often been compared to Durham as in terms of Black Wall Street, and it had the Tulsa race riots, and folks locally are now kind of rebuilding around this theme of Black Wall Street. But in where was the Greenwood section, the Black Wall Street section, it's all white firms and all white contractors and folks like that. And so it reminds me a lot of, during the time whenever the whole energy and environment space was being developed and folks were greenwashing, right? It's like, okay, we're gonna say we're doing something new. We're just gonna, we're gonna call it something different. And so one of the biggest challenges is that as we talk about this idea of creating wealth for Black communities and creating opportunity, it seems that white firms are really, the ones that are getting so much of the opportunity and not so much the wealth creating opportunities that folks are saying for the Black community. And so I think we have to be very conscious of kind of what that means, and that, it's not just, again, whitewashing this idea of inclusion and equity, because wealth is created by the creation of businesses and the scaling of businesses. And if the white firms are getting all the opportunities still, even if it's in the name of diversity and equity, then that has tremendous ramifications. The second point I make is that, for better or worse, and all that we want to see in terms of a fair and equitable world, race neutral policies, they don't work in the sense of addressing past inequities, because they were not race neutral when the issues that got us here were not race neutral, right? So I mean, those issues were very specific in terms of suppressing or oppressing particular groups and populations. And certainly I recognize the challenges of the public sector and other folks around how do you address that. But creating race neutral policies around particularly economic development, things of that nature that that are trying to rectify challenges of the past just don't work. And so you have to find more creative ways in policy that will ultimately allow those past harms to be addressed, particularly in economic development. And so I think from a public standpoint, even as a private standpoint, we have to think about what that means and how do we come up with those policies. And then kind of finally, before I turn it over to Kevin, I say, when you think about these small opportunities, Stella's talking about a couple of opportunities with parks and recreation, things of that nature, and the barriers that come with that. And La-Tasha talked about those barriers. Like anybody else, the pathway to bigger opportunities are these smaller opportunities. And if the barriers to opportunities are so much so that you can't even get into those, then you never get to the point where you can take on the bigger opportunities. And then you hear the kind of feedback that we couldn't find anybody qualified to do these things. What essentially happens is, like in a lot of cases, Black firms often aren't given the opportunity to do these smaller jobs. They aren't given the opportunity to try things, to make mistakes, to learn, and to continue to grow. And that's very problematic when you're talking about the idea of how do you scale businesses, how do you grow business, how do you create wealth, how do you make sure folks in the community have jobs. And so those are the kind of three things I want to leave with you. White firms co-opting Black opportunities in this moment in time, kind of whitewashing, race neutral policies really don't address what were past race focused policies, and small businesses being left out now really have big impacts on the ability to do bigger jobs later. So Kevin, turn it over to you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kevin Price. I'm President and CEO of the Institute. And I have the good fortune of following Andrea Harris and Farad Ali, and now La-Tasha and Henry. So y'all really put the pressure on me. So I appreciate that. But it's really good to see you all. I started with the Institute back in March and had 1 week before COVID hit. And so, my kumbaya was, I was expecting to get to know the team and get out in the community and get to know each of you individually, having lived in Charlotte for 22 years now. And it didn't quite work that way. So that's the way of the world. But eventually I look forward to meeting with all of you and getting to know you on a more personal level. I can tell you before I give my comments, Greensboro is my hometown. I've lived in North Carolina most of my life, with the exception of being in the Army for several years. And I love our state. I see common issues that are impacting our state from coast to coast or from coast to the mountains. And these are not unique to one particular community. It's just the way things are done is a little different from a cultural perspective. Interestingly, back in the fall, we partnered with the state hub office to administer $7 million in grants. And partly where that came from, you all, was when I started with the Institute and COVID hit, we didn't feel like there was a voice out there that would inform you all of how COVID and the downturn in the economy was impacting diverse businesses, particularly minority, across the state. And so we commissioned a series of studies with other nonprofits across the state to just understand the impact and what's happening. And part of what we kept hearing consistently from quarter to quarter was that there was way too much loan money on the street, and that money was too hard to access, and nowhere near enough grant money. And I remember a African-American owned business owner asking me, let me make sure I get this straight now. I've lost revenue. You can clearly see I've lost revenue, and you're asking me to repay a loan based on lost revenue. Where does that business model work? And so we set out with the state to create this grant program. And I know Durham has done a lot of work in this space as well, and I'm appreciative of that with other partners. But I think there's an opportunity for us to do more as it relates to how we create opportunities around streamlining processes. And, you know, the last 14 years, I was in supply chain leading supplier diversity for Novant Health. And we saw similar problems even on the corporate side. And you want to streamline that process because for us, it gets to the number of jobs we create, the amount of people who now have the opportunity to care for themselves versus us caring for them. So this is really about how we create opportunities for reinvestment of our dollars in a way that makes sense. It's a business thing for me. But that means that, to Henry's point, it has to be somewhat equitable across the system so that those small businesses have opportunities. And what we noticed was if you create opportunities where there are barriers, meaning I've got 130 pages that I've got to respond to, and I'm a very small business owner who is trying his best or her best to keep the doors open in this environment we're operating in, they're more likely not to be successful or not to apply in the first place, which then leaves us with the impression that they don't exist or that they're so unsophisticated and incapable that they're not going to be successful. Why should we take that risk? When you look at the core issue, it was how we set up the opportunity in the first place. So I would just raise that as a challenge for you, is let's think through more how we streamline processes for small business owners, understanding the environment they're in right now, and that they're very challenged anytime, really, to keep their doors open, but more so, it's even more magnified in this environment. And I'll leave it at that. So Stella, I don't know if you wanted to have some Q&A, but I wanted to give you some time back.
Thank you so much. And I just wanted to say how much I appreciate the insight that each of you brought to this issue. I hope that the other attendees do as well. One of the things that I have, and my big concern, Kevin, Henry, and La-Tasha, is that my old company, the National Community Reinvestment Coalition, recently completed a study of North Carolina minority businesses and found that 62% of Black small businesses had closed for good since August. 62%. And like you pointed out, Kevin, a model where you lose revenue to get a loan is not a healthy model. It's built to fail. These contract RFPs that are being issued by the city of Durham are built to fail. They were built to say, we did our best, we tried, but they're not built to succeed. Black small businesses they need loans, they need grants. But what would help them to get where Henry is talking about is contracts with the city, contracts with the county that give them a foot in the door and the references they need and to grow. Contracts, not grants. Contracts, not loans. Contracts. They are businesses and they want to do business. And so I'd kind of like for the panel to talk about things you've seen that have been successful in moving people into contracts, especially you, Kevin, as you have worked on the supply chain side. How can we simplify the entry into getting that first contract. And then I'd like for Henry and La-Tasha to talk about how do you get the business ready for that first contract. Kevin.
We got an environment where the Washington Post reported back in April that we've lost somewhere around 41% of African-American businesses and another 37, 38% of Latinx businesses nationwide. And I was having some conversations with state leaders who were asking me, well, what do you think that relates to from a state perspective? I said, probably parity. So if you think about that a minute, if we've lost that many businesses and all of those jobs that are lost, streamlining this process so that we can then fill this vacuum and create opportunities for businesses to come in, I think is the right approach to this. What that means then is we have to pare down the information we need from them to exactly what we need. And it shouldn't be the type of disparity where I'm seeing 130 pages versus 30 or 40 pages for a similar opportunity. So I think the way we get at that is streamlining the process and making sure we identify and partner with organizations out there that can support us. Now, we have a women's business center in Durham, as you all know, that supports businesses and will help guide them through that process if need be. But again, we need your help in terms of making sure there's balance with the opportunity.
Thank you.
I'll jump in, Stella, and just kind of say but we also need to look at how to change or expand the models, right? So typically we've kind of operated where a entrepreneur kind of works by themselves and, and is having to manage this process by themselves. There are some models where we need to look at maybe they need to joint venture or team with other similar or sized organizations to leverage resources. So, another model is to really look at it from a worker cooperative model, which is, once again, being able to really kind of leverage skills and resources and skill sets, and then and really being able to do it differently, right? So we're in a time and an age where we're now all on the Zoom call where this probably would have been an in-person meeting, right? So we're now working and operating differently than we have in the past. So we also have to figure out what does that look like differently than it has before. So I know before some of the RFP packages have broken down, been broken to smaller packages so that it can be for companies to participate. I know that, they have been a sharing of technology or resources, but even if there was sharing of other things for success so that businesses can then not only be able to respond, but also we want businesses to grow and thrive, right? So we're looking forward to them being able to not only participate in the RFP, but also to grow where they can not only do on local government and state government, but even in the federal space. But you've got to start somewhere. And so even if they were a subcontractor on a project, to work their way up to where they can then be their own prime, or they're the primary one receiving that contract. So I think we got to outline some steps and stages, because a lot of times the entrepreneurs that I'm working with don't even understand that you got to start maybe as a subcontractor and how to participate in that, and then grow to where then they can be what we call a prime, or they're the they are the owner of that particular contract, and then they're working with subcontractors. So I do think we've got to really explore models differently and really explore packages and the way that packages or RFPs, when I say packages, are put together differently, and then take it all the way through the entire process of how payments are done. You know, so typically another challenge on the back end is, as I mentioned, kind of the money. So payments are typically done, you know, sometimes 90, 120 days. Well, unfortunately, entrepreneurs can't wait that long. They don't have, you know, the cash reserves, and especially now, to be able to wait. So we've got to really change not only the model, but the systems and the processes. So I think those are some solutions to what we, you know, are thinking about. And then how to really implement some technology to help make it easier, you know, so that, and then training on that technology. I mean, you know, I noticed that those RFPs that you said, they come out, you can get a text message of RFPs now. However, if you don't have the capacity to, or even know how to really respond, or that infrastructure to say, here's how that at least setup should be, to that. And then this is the last comment, and then I'll hand it to Henry. So someone asked, Dr. Wanders asked about SBTDC. So just as terms of resources that are available. So Kevin mentioned the great work that the Institute does and the services that they provide. While the SBTDC, one of their divisions is what we call PTAC, so which is the North Carolina Procurement Technical Assistance Center. And they do provide some services, but once again, this is typically on a federal level, and this is for businesses that have already the capacity and infrastructure and technology. So for some of the smaller ones that are kind of in that, you know, initial phase or transitioning to be able to do business, they would need to have some of these things in process all together. But there is some services that are out there, but for the ones that we're referring to, some of it, you know, the business owner, it needs to have done some of the work. And I think that's where there's some gaps of service and some opportunities to really look at how do we do some things differently. So, so I'm gonna pass it to Henry, and then I'll answer some of the other questions in the chat.
And Henry, I'm gonna limit you to 3 minutes so I can shut it down and hand it back to Will.
No problem, Stella. I'm gonna try not to even take those 3 minutes, but I mean, I'm gonna just pick up on what folks are saying. I mean, and so there's a book that's coming out at some point around the impact of COVID-19 on African Americans in general. About 13, 14 scholars were asked to contribute to that. I was asked to write a chapter on the impact of COVID-19 on African American businesses. And so, picking up on Kevin's point, as I look through the actual data, I mean, you can't really talk about what COVID-19 did to the Black community and the Black businesses without understanding where we were before, right? I mean, you know, it's not like these things just happen overnight. And so it's important to understand that context by which you know, we're dealing with. And so even when we're talking about the idea of getting payroll protection program loans and things like that, I mean, you know, even if the idea was to get loan, we weren't even getting those. I mean, and so there's so many challenges that have come with this. And so the one thing I want to focus on in these last couple of minutes is, and this I think picks up on kind of everybody's point, is this pipeline issue, right? And what I mean by pipeline issue is that we can't just think about these businesses whenever kind of there's this heightened sense of racial equity, right? You know, I got 2 kids. My daughter's 21, my son's 19. They both go to UNC, so they started back to school today. You know, when COVID hit, you know, I had grown kids. I was like, look, y'all on your own. You know, you educated now. I've made my investment. You know, I sympathize with my friends who have these, you know, 6 and 7-year-olds and things of that nature. But I mention that because, you know, we treat Black businesses like, you know, like, oh, we're going to make an investment in you now because kind of, you know, you're kind of the flavor of the month. And then you kind of fall off, and you cannot do that. You cannot just kind of, you know, make investments for, you know, a couple of years, then stop. And all. There's a constant need for investment so that when opportunities come about, you're ready. Imagine, again, going back to children, imagine that, you know, any of you all that have children that you basically decide that you're going to educate them or feed them or do whatever the case every few years, and then you're going to leave them to be for a few years, and then when you feel like again you bring them back in. And so a lot of times the pipeline that we have for businesses, for Black businesses particularly, it operates like that. And so you then act surprised whenever these opportunities come up and folks aren't ready for them. And so I say my biggest my takeaway from this is that we have to invest in that pipeline constantly through growth, economic expansions, economic contractions, and because we have to get to the root of the issue of what's causing this and why folks aren't being able to get some of these opportunities. The last thing I say is that the old saying that folks say, oh well, this is what we see is not what we want to see, expect to see, but it's what was designed. It was what was designed for us to be, right? Inequity by design. I mean, these aren't things that just happen, by themselves. Inequity was built into the system, and if we really want to change things, equity has got to be built by design and back into the system. And so we all have to take a part of that and understand that in order to actually move forth. And so we're not having these same conversations, in the years ahead. But thank you again, and pass it back to you, Stella.
Thank y'all so much. And that's gonna, you said it for me, Henry. Equity has to be by design. And it's not design words on paper, it's action. By design, 130-page RFP to paint a bridge, to paint a wall. That's ridiculous. You can't get in the system that way. And you don't need a whole lot of business acumen to have a painter, a paint contractor come in and paint that gym. It didn't take 130 pages to do that. It certainly didn't take 130 pages to do that when there were only 30 pages needed to build a ropes course. And half of that were pictures. Wib, I blame you.
Well,
and I'm on the record. So to the city council members, to the county commissioners, to the department heads on this call, the person you can blame for what I'm about to do to y'all for the next 90 days is Wib Gully, because he is the one that asked me to look at barriers for minority and women businesses for this program. And when I found what the barriers were and where they were and whose they were and the promises that were made and the small business, small local business enterprise words on paper, and the minority women business words on paper, and the diversity and inclusion words on paper, and the non-discrimination words on paper. But I found a 130-page RFP to paint a wall. Blame it on Wib. And with that, I turn it over to you, Wib.
thank you. Well, I would say several things, but one, thank you from the bottom of my heart to you, to Ms. Best-Gaddy, certainly to Mr. Henry McCoy and Kevin Price. You all, this is great. Kevin, belated welcome to Durham from at least about 85 of us who've gotten a chance to spend a little time with you today, and we'll look forward to meeting you and working with you in person as the year rolls forward. And, Stella, I'd have to say that rather than blame, I'd like at least indirect tiny fraction of credit for this program. It is really a wonderful, thoughtful program. These problems are not new, and the specific challenges and actually some of the answers suggested are not new. But I don't think I've seen a program recently that framed it better and precisely nailed at least some of the work that we need to do. And I'm really grateful to all of you all for that. We want to have time for questions and answers at all of our meetings for this, but as you know that we've used all the program time, I would ask folks who have questions for any of the panelists or in general to feel free to put them into the chat. And then what we'll do is try after the meeting to get them, and Reverend Van Velzen, you'll have to help so we can preserve the chat and try and then get the questions to the panelists and then get answers back out by email to folks as best we can. So that said, I would also want to add only that we were so happy to have Commissioner Heidi Carter join us. And I'm sorry, Heidi, I noticed that late. And our not new, but experienced and wonderful city manager, Ms. Page. It's good to have you with us as well today. And the mayor let me know that he's been on the whole program, streaming it through Facebook, which is another way that anybody that wants to in the community can join us. And we usually do have a good number of folks there. So all of that said, we don't usually do this, but I'm going to recognize Commissioner Burns by way of saying welcome, and we're so happy for you taking on the responsibilities of the commission. You said you want to say something really quickly. You have the floor for a minute. Yes, ma'am. And you got to go unmute yourself.
I am going to unmute. I have been on two things. I had you on.
There's a lot.
That was what I was.
Oh, yeah, that's going on. Okay.
So my apologies. I do apologize for my first meeting. Well, not my first one, but my first one since being sworn in. So I do appreciate this opportunity. And thank you. I want to say, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Senator, the Honorable. I don't want to just say Wib. So. Yeah. But just really quick about something that Ms. Adams, Ms. Gaddy, Mr. Price, and Mr. McCoy just put out. Also, if nobody's seen it, Henry did just put out a really nice paper, Resiliency. I saw that come out maybe a couple of days ago, and it talked about how minority businesses, Black businesses in particular, have been treated throughout the pandemic. So it's a good read. What I want to throw, and I've mentioned this to Commissioner Howerton, and she had to get off, and I've also mentioned it to Commissioner Jacobs. One of the things that the manager did, to aid in making sure that we kept our budget the way we did was to freeze positions. So as soon as Netta and I came on through orientation or Commissioner Alam, one of the first things that we noticed was that there were two positions for MWBE that had not been filled. So we have a coordinator, but as of right now, we do not have a director. And so this requires a heavy lift. And it can't be done by one person who is a coordinator. So as we go throughout this budget cycle, I want you all to know that I will be laser focused on making sure that we build up that office in ways that can not just support, but really start to build in our marrow the things that Stella was talking about. Because as much as we might want to do it, I'm not going to echo Stella, but I've kind of been beating the drum on this. Every time I look, we're talking about it, writing about it, saying keywords like diversity and inclusion, and nobody's doing anything. And we have so many great partners that are actually headquartered right here in Durham, where this work should not be that hard. You all know I worked in supply chain before this. I worked in diversity and inclusion before this. So you have people at the table. So when you do have these very tough questions, I'm not always going to, be a yes person. I think people have found that out over the past couple of weeks, but this is an issue that's very near and dear to my heart. And I want you to know that I've talked to my chair and my vice chair, and we do want to make sure that this position is filled so that we can start to really build some synergy around this. And hopefully it won't be done overnight, but in a year or two, this won't necessarily have to be a conversation we can have. We can talk about our successes. And so that's all I want to throw out there.
Great. Thank you so much, Commissioner Burns, and good to have you with us. I guess if I'm getting blamed for today, it's good to know that in a year or two, you're going to solve all these problems so I can get So I know it's going to take a while. I wanted to add that City Council member Deidreana Freeman has been listening to us through Facebook as well, and let me know that. That's great to have your help. And Henry, there's a request for you to share your article if it's possible, or a link to it on the chat. And if that doesn't work, you can email it to Becky Winders or me, and we'll get it out on an email if folks are interested in that article.
Yeah, I was gonna say I get it. It's actually a report that I took part in. It was a group of us, and we looked at kind of the impact of COVID on North Carolina and kind of what the challenges were and what the needs were and things like that on Black business. So what I do is I will get it to you, Wib, or Becky, or somebody, and you can get it out to the whole group. So
we'll tell them what that source is. Yeah,
I get it to you.
That sounds great. All righty. Well, this is a richer subject and there's a lot more to be said, but I really am grateful for all that we've been able to get done today. What I'm going to do in just a couple of minutes very quickly is get updates on two issues. As you all know, who've been with the coalition for a while, for at least several years, it seems longer, but I think 3 years, we've been working on tax assistance for low-income homeowners with their property taxes, which have been surging in some neighborhoods and pose a real problem. And of course, Stella and the Durham committee have helped us a great deal with that too. Jim Savara, I was going to recognize you quickly for an update on that work and that program effort. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And very quickly, we've gotten a report from the tax administration. There were only 6 applications for the new county city deferred payment program. And 5 of the 6 withdrew when they found out that they had to pay back the deferred loan. So only one application has been accepted. There were some increases in homestead exemptions and disabled veteran, 165 combined between the two, and we helped to spread the word about those programs as well. And let me thank everybody who did help disseminate information, but we need to come back to this issue, return to discussion of having a grant rather than this deferred payment, which creates a big bill that people have to pay down the road.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. That's a good summary, and it certainly indicates it's a new year. We need a new direction. Hopefully that'll be more effective at providing real assistance to all those low-income homeowners. Also, we had, as many of you know, there's a transit equity campaign that's been developed in the last year, despite COVID in Durham. And John Talmadge has been one of the key leaders in that. And John, I was going to ask you to give us a quick update on work going on there and upcoming activity.
Thanks, Webb. We're still in a phase of listening to the community about the interests that they have in improving the public transportation system. The public sector is developing a plan that will set the priorities for spending of our transit tax over the next 10 to 20 years. And that's about $1 billion in local money over the next 20 years. The public sector is developing the scenarios for feedback and would expect that that comes out to all of us for comment in late February or March. And so we're tracking that and working together with the committee, Durham Congregations in Action. I'm representing Bike Durham. The coalition is involved, as well as the People's Alliance and other organizations. And you can learn more at bikedurham.org/transit. I'll put that in the chat if you want to see more about the campaign. Thank you, Webb.
Thank you, John, and appreciate you listening to that link in the chat. And there's been a suggestion that the Merrick neighborhood would be good to involve, but I think you already know Ms. Green and are working with her in that. That's a good suggestion. Quick mention, I've got 1 minute about future events and meetings. The coalition will have a policy committee meeting on Tuesday, January 26th. It's from 5 to 6:30 in the late afternoon, early evening. And you can contact Becky Winders, and she can put her email in the chat. Perhaps you can contact her if you want to get the link for that meeting. We're looking forward to, at this coming meeting, January 26th, to have most, if not all, of our Durham local state legislative delegations, the members of the House and Senate, join us for a discussion about affordable housing initiatives and help that they can provide perhaps at the state level. And we also wanted to talk a little bit about eviction prevention in Durham going forward. Our coordinating committee is the group that kind of sets up the meetings and the agendas, and everyone's invited to join us at that. And the next one is February 1st from noon to 1:30. And you can contact Becky or me if you want to join that. If you want to join us for that, we'd love to have help and support with that work. Our next meeting is the third Monday, as they always are, except for today, in February, and that'll be February 15th. And we're really fortunate that we're going to have the chair and members of the Durham County Board of Commissioners join us for that meeting and talk some about Durham County and their priorities and program and work around affordable housing and transit. for 2021. So that should be, I think, an important meeting. And I'm sure we'll tie to what's going on today, but also good work the county's been doing and things that we can do going forward. I would invite you to all of those meetings. I want to express again how much we appreciate everyone being with us today. And it strengthens all of us to work together and build community around these issues. So check the chat for links, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you so much.